Thank you so much for joining. Natalie Canizares. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did a great job.
Okay, thank you. I did my Spanish lesson earlier today, so I always feel a little more confident to get my Spanish lesson in. So anyway, thanks so much for joining me. You are, believe me, you've been requested quite a bit because there's so many Apex fans. When are you going to interview Vantage? Well, she's busy.
Gotta get a hold of her first.
Got to get a hold of her. She's busy. And then, as you told me, like, Chris, I don't know anything about the game. And I said, that doesn't matter. It's fine. It's okay.
I felt bad. I feel bad. I want to eventually play it. But yeah, I've never even played. But I've never played any video games, really, ever.
Right. Okay. Okay. Search your mind. Search your memory banks. What was the last video game you can remember playing?
Does Wii count? Like Wii bowling?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is
Wii bowling in like the early 2000s. Yeah.
Wow. I remember the Wii. We had a Wii.
We didn't even have one. I didn't have any video games growing up, so that's probably part of it.
Really?
Yeah, I did play Duke Nukem when I was a little girl, but that was a computer game.
Okay.
My dad would play it, and so me and my sister and I would play, and then my mom would get really angry and be like, "They're not allowed to play that." But I loved it. But I was really small, and then I played like Wii with friends in that time, and that's it. And that's really it.
Yeah. The last time we had a Wii, it was my wife and me before we had kids, and we just did it for funsies, and we convinced ourselves that somehow it was exercise. But yeah, I mean, there's exercise and there's that.
And then there's that. It's its own category, but it's not sitting there, at least for the most part. So
right. Well, also, even though you're not a video gamer, you still you're quite active with tech. We were talking earlier about how I don't really understand tech well at all, and you told me you don't, but you're busy making projects happen that involve having to, I'm sure, wrangle a lot of gear, a lot of moving parts.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've only made one official short film. And I had a lot of the gear myself. I borrowed lights from a friend. I have a really nice camera, thankfully, and a good lens. And I hired a sound person who I had worked with on a different film. But the tech side of it, like I'm trying to learn editing. Obviously, I use iMovie for my auditions, so that's easy. But what is it called? Adobe Premiere is what I'm trying to learn, but it is really hard for me. It's like truly, it breaks my brain. I'm not good at it yet at all. So
no, I am there with you. I streamed in 2019. I started streaming because I can't say I discovered Apex. I was in the game. They launched it, but I didn't play it. I had zero interest in playing it. I wasn't playing video games except when I had a little bit of time, I'd play a sports game because I have two kids and they were much younger. And my brother told me about it. He said, you should play the game. It's fun. I started playing it. The game's fun, but it's really hard. And
that's what I've heard people are like, you can try it, but you're going to die right away. And I'm like, okay.
You're going to die and you're going to get very angry and frustrated. And you're going to think this game is stupid. And I still say that all the time. But I started noticing that even though I was dreadful at the game, it was entertaining to see how bad I was. And I would do the voice of Pathfinder in the game and talk to other players without them knowing I was the voice of Pathfinder. So I thought, all right, what if I streamed this? And I started learning how streaming works. But the more I realized how streaming works, the more I realized that I have a Mac, and I'm a big fan of Macs. All the devices I have are Macs whenever possible. And all the technology you use to stream with is PC.
Oh.
And I learned that Mac does not play well with others. And so every time I tried to make streaming easier by adopting a PC related program, I made everything more complicated. So now that,
just so you know, like, I have Macs and that's as far as I go.
Exactly. Yeah. I just thought, okay, either Mac, go make this program that everybody says I need, or learn how to play nice with other programs. And you don't want to do that. Yeah. Because when you were talking about how hard it is for you to use Adobe Premiere, I don't even want to think about what that's like.
It's really bad. really hard. It is not intuitive for me at all. And like, oh my gosh, I'm used to being like iMovie's so simple. And it's like, for me, it's intuitive because it's like, I don't know. And then I'm like, why doesn't this feel remotely the same? Even when I do something correctly, it feels incorrect. And I'm like, yeah.
I know. I use iMovie to edit everything. And people will say, oh, you got to get into Pro Tools and this and that. I just start shaking my head as they
I know that was my stance. But now that I'm making films, I like, of course I can hire an editor, or my husband edited the last thing, but he's really busy. So I'd like to know a little bit about everything so I can like put my hand, like kind of do what I need to do and be scrappy about it instead of like always needing everybody's help.
Exactly. Now, and there's value in that. Yesterday we were having lunch while we were out, and we homeschool our kids. Our kids are 9 and 11 years old. Yeah. When I say we, I mean my wife. She does the bulk of the work. I help whenever possible. But one of the topics we included is called wellness. And I did cognitive behavioral therapy years ago, and I still retain the tenets of it. It works very well for me. And it's a good approach for people who want to sort of change some thinking that's not as productive. Mm-hmm. So I pass along some of this to them, and every now and then we'll talk about, all right, how are we staying in balance today? And yesterday, without thinking about it, I thought this is a good time to talk about this. And I said, all right, let's talk about what IP is. Okay. And they already kind of know intellectual property. All right. And we're going to learn how to create our own IP and how to own it and control it. And you guys are going to learn how to create your art, because they're both artists in ways. My son is a voice actor. My daughter's an artist. She's learning animation. She draws everything. And I said, you guys are going to learn how to create your content, how you're going to own it, and how you're going to learn how to do as much of it as possible on your own. Don't rely on other people whenever possible. So I figured I had to learn this stuff in my 40s and 50s. I'd like for you to learn it now.
Now. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. That it helps instill growth mindset, which is something I'm working on as an adult. Having a growth mindset, definitely wasn't raised with a growth mindset. It's like, if you're not perfect at it, throw it in the garbage, just do things you're good at, you can get better incrementally. Like, that's embarrassing. So those are the undertones. No one said that to me explicitly, but I think that's really important to teach children. And I love that. And yeah, you got to be able to know how to do it yourself. And that's not to say that collaboration isn't important and wonderful. But still, you don't want to be at the whim of everyone. And as an actor, I was just constantly feeling like, oh my God, I can't just keep waiting for someone to choose me. And it's like, I have thoughts and ideas. Also, I'm a creator and an artist. So yeah, I'll do it. Yeah.
Right. Now, where did you learn the idea of, because there's an old saying that when the when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah.
And there are two ways to look at that. There are people, my wife is one of them, who thinks everything happens for a reason. Even though she's not religious, she's practically an atheist, she still believes that everything happens for a reason. Mm-hmm. I actually believe that no matter what happens, that things are total chaos. Well, no matter what happens, you can create reason out of it. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is you're still operating with the idea that there's a reason for things. You can either pull it out of what happened, or you can think that something wiser than you put this in front of you. But I've always taken the student-teacher bromide to mean that there are teachers everywhere. There's wisdom everywhere, behind every leaf, under every rock. But when you're not looking for it, when you're not ready to receive it, you'll just walk right by, blissfully unaware of it. But when you're finally ready to start learning lessons, they just pop all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I am a firm believer in just the fact that our perspective, our point of view, it totally colors every experience, like everything in our lives, so it's really all about the lens that you see things from, and and your filter. And so exactly, when you start to see, when you're like, oh, I want to make things. And then all of a sudden you see an opportunity here and an opportunity there, and nothing has changed externally. Right. It's just that you're open to it. And I think that's like, life is like a series of shifting perspective and just opening your eyes to more layers and things,
Right. Yeah, a friend of mine calls it the my purple car syndrome.
Exactly.
You've never noticed purple cars ever, but as soon as you buy one or ride around in one, you start noticing, oh, there's a purple car.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where did you, if you can remember, where did you learn the idea of growth mindset? So this is something you adopted as you got older.
I mean, I'm like a super personal development person. Like I'm very into therapy. You mentioned CBT therapy. I've been in and out of therapy for many, many years.
Mhm.
But most recently I've been doing EMDR therapy, which has been like very life-changing for me. I don't know if you know what that is.
I'm vaguely aware of it. Could you break that down?
Trying to remember what it stands for. It's like eye movement, something. It's a kind of a weird acronym, but basically it's about reprocessing trauma, and it's about like activating both hemispheres of the brain. One, two, one, two. So you can do it. My therapist is in person, so she does it with like these tappers. They like buzz. And they buzz. And so it's like stimulates either side of the brain. Some people use like a light board. So it's like you're looking side to side, but basically what it is to help your nervous system and your brain get into a relaxed state. And then you reprocess trauma and in a safe environment. And it helps like diffuse the thing. So it's not like lording over you every day and affecting your perspective. But anyway, so therapy has been a huge part of my life. And I like read personal development. I just like love learning about personal development. I was also a wellness coach for a while. So it's just a whole side of my personality. Yeah.
That's very important. We're totally on the same page there because my uncle was a psychologist and my parents divorced when I was very young. And so I didn't really see my dad much growing up. I'd see him once or twice a year. We'd go visit. So my uncle also lived far away, but he would take an interest in how we were all being raised. I have 3 brothers, 2, and then my mom got married again, had another boy. Mom wanted a girl so bad.
Oh, poor mom.
She would tell me, she said, I cried in the hospital after each of y'all were born. I was born in the South. Where are you from? Well, I was raised in the South. Yeah. But he would take an interest and he would impart to me the idea of, you're all right, you're one person right now, but you don't have to stay that person. Okay. You work on things. Your brain is malleable, although yes, your ages 2 to 5, those are really very important formative years. And the therapist I had, because cognitive behavioral therapy is designed so that one day you stop going. That you absorb the lessons, you continue to use them, but the therapist is only there to make sure you get it. But he would tell me, he says, by 10, your bags are packed. That wiring is hardwired. But the whole point of therapy is rewiring those little pathways that aren't working. They keep leading you to the wrong choices. And you talk about processing trauma. I think a lot of people may think that, oh, trauma means something really horrific that happened. Yeah, not necessarily. There are little tiny things that add up over time. And before you know it, you're a person that's formed by that.
And it's also it's how you perceive it, right? So it's like you might be a 3-year-old and you're, like you experience something that as a 30-year-old or a 15-year-old, you would think is nothing, but the way your little 3-year-old mind perceives it, or it's a rupture in attachment, you're not getting your needs met. That is like really intense on a 3-year-old brain versus an older person. So trauma is a relative word. Yeah. There's big T trauma and little T trauma. And I've had car accidents, I've had big T trauma, but a lot of the stuff I've been working through is more just little T childhood stuff that, we're all born into families and families are made up of people and we are all like broken teacups. So it's like, it's just the way it's part of life. Yeah.
I think Hamlet said it best, Shakespeare or Christopher Marlowe, depending on who you're listening to, said it best. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So a mindset is extremely important. This kind of dovetails with the world that we find ourselves in Apex. I have met virtually so many gamers, so many content creators, so many streamers that love the game and love playing it, but they also share openly how much they deal with anxiety, with trauma. Now, the game sometimes perhaps can help them process that, but a lot of times they admit they spend more time playing because they're too traumatized in certain ways to be comfortable going out and engaging the world more. And what I try to impart to them is, like you talked about with the EMDR, you are in a supervised setting. You are slowly rewiring, but you're doing it with help. You're doing it in a way that is curated so that you never feel as though you're going to get in a situation that you can't handle.
Exactly.
This is what I try to tell people. You don't have to suddenly throw a big party and invite everybody. Just in a little way, take a step. Take a step.
Like, for instance, I was in a bad car accident in college, and it really, like, it just I was a dancer in college. I had to get knee surgery. I had to leave school. It was traumatizing. And it was like, and it made me really afraid of driving. I moved to New York City after college. Then I didn't drive for years. So I couldn't even get behind a wheel when I first moved to LA.
Right.
And I still don't drive on the freeway.
This is not a great town to drive in.
Not, but I've been working on getting back on the freeway, and like, and it's little steps. It's like driving next to it, or getting on and getting off. And sometimes it's a no for me, but sometimes I do it. And I really do think like letting yourself take those incremental steps, and also being kind to yourself and generous when it's too hard and when you don't feel good to do it, like, but we all go through stuff like that. There is no human being that is not dealing with some version of something like that.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's the illusion we see with social media and stuff. It's like people seem perfect and their lives seem great. And it's just like, we're all hurting.
Yeah. I've talked about that too. Part of the reason why I'm on now is that I shifted. In the beginning when I was streaming, it was, hey, I'm Chris, I'm Pathfinder. Everybody come look at me. As actors, half the time, that's the subtext of what we're saying. Look at me.
Look at me.
Which goes back to when we were 4 at the family barbecue. Look at me. 100%. Mom is telling a story. But yeah, I know. But more and more I talk about these very important to me issues, which is people are hurting and they don't know how to show it. At least we now have a dialogue. We now have a vocabulary to discuss mental health, which we did not when I was younger. It just wasn't discussed. But I talk about little piles of pebbles. I'd say, all right, here's you right now, and it's a big pile. Here's who you want to be. Just take one at a time, and gradually one pile is going to get small, the other one's going to get big. But what you said, I think, is very important. You have to forgive yourself. You're not going to do it right all the time. When you screw up or when you lapse into the old you make a mistake. It's okay. Forgive yourself. You're not perfect.
It's grace. You just have to have grace with yourself. Like, it's easier to have grace for other people usually. You just have to extend it back to yourself.
Right. Now you seem, and I think this is probably true of people in the acting profession and just in the performing arts. We like to share ourselves with audiences. So a lot of times I've found that people in that field are more open to therapy to begin with. They want to, they don't, some people hide behind characters, and sometimes you can see that. But I think a lot of us just are open to the idea of examining who we are. And so it's really, to me, I'd much rather be doing something to work on myself than ignoring it, as tempting as that is sometimes.
Yeah, there's just like, I mean, I've gone through hard times, with my own mental health growing up, and like the suffering of being stuck in my mind prison, and like the same patterns was worse to me than facing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, at least when I face it, even if it's really uncomfortable, I have autonomy. I have some power, and I can actually do something, as opposed to being a victim to my circumstances or just my mind. And so much of what I try to share with my kids and to just anyone who will listen is you've got to see the world in ways that that you're in control of. There's so much that you're not in control of, but I've in my own opinion, I think all good therapy, all good philosophy boils down to a riff on the serenity prayer, whether you're religious or not. Grant me the serenity to accept what I cannot change,
the strength to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. It's a lifelong process.
Yeah.
But sometimes you will not get a handle on the things that shaped you as a child until you spend quite a bit of time looking at them. Until
Yes.
one day, maybe you get a realization, oh my God, I never thought of it that way before. And I wouldn't have come to that conclusion if I didn't put in some hard work.
And it is hard work, and it can be daunting. And it's like, there are times where, but I think it's worth it just to experience like the freedom that comes with unburdening yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I will bet you a steak dinner, and in this inflationary market, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I will bet you that the person you were when you started doing therapy, whatever iteration of it was, is miles away from who you are now. And I will bet you that you are so much better at managing yourself and your life than if you had just avoided it and said, no, it's too painful, I'm not going to do it.
Yes. 1,000,000%. You know what is invaluable, that is worth more than infinite steak dinners in this economy, is the feeling of security within myself that I have gained over the past, especially the past 2 years. Like, I know there are things in my life that will rock me, and there are things that will shake me, but I do feel like a steadiness within myself that I have never felt. Like, I know I have myself.
Yeah.
I am secure within myself, even though I waver, even though I have hard days and hard moments. And like, there is like a deep, deep knowing that I can take care of myself. And that's not something I felt before. So worth it. And yeah, I urge everyone to take a look at themselves, however much they're able to. I mean, it's just, I'm very passionate about this. Yeah.
Oh, well, good. Believe me, I can go on and on about
I
that.
could do. I mean, I read, like, I read The Body. I don't know if you've read The Body Keeps the Score. I just finished reading that.
No, I have found that, look at me getting comfortable. Oh, we're going to talk about this. Okay, cool. I have found that you will, I have a friend who has a philosophy degree, and he said, you really don't need to read too deep into philosophy before you keep coming across the same truth over and over again. And I have found that self-improvement is much the same, in that if it doesn't revolve around the idea of you taking charge of how you feel and making sure that you have a healthy and appropriate reaction to things that happen that are beyond your control, then things are going to break down, and your body's going to be a reflection of it as well. My wife was a big Louise Hay fan. Mm-hmm. And Louise Hay, there's a limit for what I will,
that's Abraham Hicks, right? There's a writer that channels Abraham Hicks, and so it's like a person that.
Okay, no, that's something I'm not familiar with. Yeah, but what Louise Hay would write about, and there's a degree she would take where I would say, well, I don't know if I'm with that, but the general idea I'm with, which is whatever you're thinking about, it's going to reflect itself in your body as well, because you can manage or create stress with how you think, how you react to things. Obviously, stress manifests in your body. You're releasing cortisol, the stress hormone, things like that.
Is she a law of attraction person?
I don't know if she's a law of attraction person. She would talk quite a bit about how you thought and how you behaved in your life and how it reflected in your body and how it affected your health. Mm-hmm. And that a lot of times people would have disease, and it was her belief that much disease, I don't know how much of it, was a reflection of how we've been living. Yeah. So there is some evidence behind that you can stress your way into being very ill.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The Body Keeps the Score is a really interesting book written by, what's his name? Oh gosh, I can't remember his name right now, but it's all about how we store trauma in our bodies, and how, our bodies they reflect. It also explains trauma in a really but it's quite heady. A lot of people, I'll recommend it and they'll be like, that is too much. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I just like to read about this stuff. I just read All About Love by Bell Hooks, which was really interesting as well, which is totally different kind of vein, but it's also like philosophical. And Yeah.
What's the concept behind that?
Just the idea of love, just because like as a culture, we're obsessed with love and we talk about it all the time, and movies and
Mhm.
everything reflect like this idea of love, but
Mhm.
our culture doesn't necessarily reflect back to us like what true healthy love is.
Mhm.
And she just is like looking at the definitions of love and what she thinks it is, and like what there is to it, that it's like an active thing and it's a choice, and it's not like, oh, I just like fell in love and I can't help myself, like all that
Yeah,
stuff.
that's a romantic notion. I mean, I'll take a stab at it. Tell me if I'm in the ballpark, but uh the idea of love is supposed to mean that you're not trying to change somebody. You're being giving, you're being generous because it makes you feel good to do something for someone else. They'll return that to you because that's the kind of person they are. And the idea of the romantic notion of love, where you're filled with this giddiness, that's usually a phase. And I
Yeah.
can't remember the chemical name for it, but there's a chemical that usually lasts about 2 years in a relationship, and after that it tends to taper off, and then you're left with what the relationship is actually built on, which
Yeah.
is ideally it's a partnership. It's the two of
Mhm.
you together, you have each other's back, and you are not necessarily intertwined in every single thing that you do, but you're moving in the same direction, and the way that you're moving is compatible.
Yeah.
So it's there are different ways to experience it, I'm sure, and everybody knows what that giddiness is like, but that's short-lived.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of times it's a lot of different things,
Yeah,
chemicals. Yeah. It's not there are connections, right? But that's not necessarily like love. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. A lot of that is yeah, a lot of that's what I think drives a lot of dating sites.
Hmm.
People are looking for this sort of little bit of chemical
The dopamine hit. And then it's also like ego validation, and kind of like
yeah.
bringing it back to what you said about acting, and like, kind of like, look at me and like, look what I got. And there's that whole aspect to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember one thing my wife told me that she thought was important to her is that I was always trying to improve. I was always trying to become a better person, because when she met me, I wouldn't say that I was a hot mess because I was maturing, but I was basically finishing. I had finished my therapy, and finished as in I was finished with needing to go and visit the therapist, but obviously you never stop learning, you never stop growing and working on yourself. But I was free to go, as they say. But she still thought, this guy has not had a long relationship in a long time, and never anything to the degree I have had. He just, I don't know if this is the guy. But she noticed that I was still trying to learn, still trying to get better, and she thought, okay, I'm gonna give this some time, and I'm gonna be patient. And I'm so thankful that she was patient, because she, being wiser than me, knew that we were right for each other before I knew it. And she thought,
Aw.
I'm just gonna wait, he's gonna come around. That's what tends to happen with us, because I have that actor's brain, that creative brain that's kind of like a beehive. And I'll bounce off the walls sometimes about something, and she'll look at me calmly and say, he's going to figure this out in about 2 to 3 days, and
Ah,
I'll calm down.
that's a nice pairing. I like that.
It's helpful because at the same time, I'm very good at relaxing, and I'm very good at taking a little time off and treating myself. She's the opposite. She's go, 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 achieve, achieve, achieve all the time. So she gets me off the couch. I get her onto the couch.
Ah,
That's what a partnership has to be. These are imperfections, but they click.
work. Yeah.
I would imagine that's kind of what you have in your life as well.
Yeah. I think that was something that definitely made me feel secure in my choice with Jeff, was his growth mindset and his like, just was always working on himself, and he was always open to getting better and improving and hungry for that. And I thought, okay, well, that's pretty much, that's like it. You need that. You just really need that. I mean, a lot of people aren't, that I had come across.
Yeah.
I would say maybe we're both a little bit like, I mean, I guess I'm calm. He's calm in his own way. We're both like really intense creatives. And so sometimes we're both crazy at the same time. But then other times we balance each other out. It really depends on the day, the week, the month, like what's going on.
That's what, yeah, I learned that as well, is that people, what you talked about earlier is important to repeat, is that we're always given these facades. We're given these superficial ideas of how other people are living. And God forbid you watch a movie or two that is selling you a romance and not reality. And most movies, even when they're really slice of life kind of movies that are expertly done, still are giving you a picture instead of the entire deal. And
100%.
so what you have to realize being in a relationship especially is not every single day, not every single moment is going to be this moment where we're two adults, we should always get along, right? It's like, no, there are going to be disagreements. There are going to be times when you're on one page, they're on a different page. But if you are adults, you'll see it. You think, okay, let's minimize this conflict before it gets out of hand. Let's see that we're both in different places. And so I can imagine you guys, two creatives, both kind of bouncing off the ceiling at the same time. One of you, I'm sure, at a certain point realizes, oh, okay, I see what's going on. All right, let's.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We're both pretty self-aware, and also both into like personal development. And so we're often quite aware of what's going on, maybe too aware. We'll be like, well, this is exactly what's good. It's like we have to like take it from the intellectual and bring it down to earth a little. It's like can get really heady in this house. We're both like very like to think and talk and like but it's good. It's good. Definitely. Yeah.
I always like to imagine when, because as you can tell, I'm fascinated by people. I'm fascinated by relationships. And I imagine two people like yourselves, like life of the mind people, that your first date must have been one of those moments where you realized, okay, this is going really well because we both love to talk about this stuff. And that's going to be really important to me going forward. I can't live with somebody who just walls themselves off or just looks at me like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, no, definitely need someone who wants to talk a lot, but about specific things, not like, I don't like to talk about like, gossip or like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't like small talk, and, I like to talk about ideas and philosophies. And, but yeah, Jeff definitely had that off the bat. And I think we both saw that in each other. We're like, oh, conversations are good.
Yes, very much so. I realize that with my wife too. She will let me just go. She'll listen, but she'll see that, okay, he's got to get this out. He can't keep this in any longer. It's got to get out.
I like process out loud. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know about you, but when I have a long conversation, I'll pace. I'll like, if I'm on the phone talking to somebody, I just wear a groove into the floor. I don't know. Motion helps me process things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also noticed
motion, but not process. I can sit still, but Jeff is like that. Jeff is like,
yeah, it might be a testosterone thing. No, I gotta move.
A male thing.
Gotta move. It could be a male thing. But I saw this interesting video on, I think it was BBC, about the Swedes, and the Swedes do not do small talk. They don't. It's a cultural thing, but they guess there's no specific answer as to why. But they believe it's because Sweden is very sparsely populated. So there aren't many places where everyone's on top of each other. And even when they are, a lot of times the culture kind of insists on getting to know someone better before you start to share your ideas with them. And so they see small talk as something that just doesn't really make any sense. And when they travel to other countries, it takes them a few days to get into a different mindset where they realize, oh, I'm in Spain. I can actually talk to people about whatever, and it's okay because everyone there is very friendly and open. And, so yeah, not to say that, you are Swedish in nature and you're.
No, I mean,
Dislike
I'm
gossip.
Latina. I'm friendly and open. I just like what with my partner or with best friends,
Yeah.
anyone who I'm having a deeply intimate relationship with, like anyone who I'm spending extended periods of time with,
Right.
has to be someone who can like get way past that really fast. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. There is the idea that at a certain point, what is this about? I know so and so said such and such. Are we
But what are we really
fulfilling a
talking
purpose
about?
here?
Like what's actually going on here? Why are you so curious about it? And what does that bring up for you? And like that's what I want to talk about. You know what I mean?
I could say that's what both of us would end up doing is like, tell me how you really feel about Teresa, because you're just going on and on about this thing that she said, which is ridiculous, by the way, but come on. What are you trying to tell me here?
But what do you really feel? Like what's going on underneath it for you? And then I want to talk about that. But
Right. Yeah, that's where I roll up my sleeves and go, oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. We're being a therapist is definitely like my plan B, even though I really hope I don't have to, do plan B, but I'm like, I could definitely see myself enjoying that. I mean, I know it's very hard, but that line of work would my cat is.
Yeah, I know. I noticed you say you have speaking of therapy, you're like stroking this animal. And hey, let's hook her up to a machine and measure her dopamine level right now. It's like,
Oh God, so high. This is like the love of my life. So
well, that's the other thing that fascinates me about our bodies and the connection to our minds is that you have so many little life hacks, to use today's parlance, to improving your mood that don't even have to be hugely structural changes. It's just, do you have a pet? Is it a cat that likes to be pet? All right, if you're feeling a little stressed, have your cat come over. Your cat probably senses you're stressed, comes over, or it could be that your cat just wants to be petted. Who knows? But look at that kitty.
Yeah, he likes to get right in the middle of the business. Yeah, there's so many little things like, drink water. Like it seems so basic.
Hydrate.
So basic, but really like, yeah, as you can see, I've been drinking my water this whole time. I'm always drinking water, like always, like so many people are dehydrated and it genuinely affects your mood. It affects everything in your body. Just drink water all day long and you will feel better. Like, there's so many little things you can do to help your mind and your body.
Right. And it's kind of like I likened this to the idea of cars. Your brain is a car. Everybody gets a car when they're born. Most people get Toyota Camrys. They're not very sexy, but they're comfortable, they're reliable, they'll get you where you need to go. They work great. Some people get Porsches, and Porsches are exciting. But if you don't know how to maintain them and drive them, you're going to fishtail. When there are curves in the road, there's going to be problems. And you're not going to know what you're doing. It's a high maintenance performance vehicle. You have to know your car. Yeah. And people who have Porsches and don't realize it don't maintain them. Well, I changed the oil 2 years ago. I don't know what the problem is.
Well,
you need to service it. Service your mind, service your body.
Yeah.
It will pay dividends. But you mentioned being Latina. My wife is Venezolana, very Latina. And I know a lot of it is cultural, but I wonder how much of it is cultural, because in almost every Latin culture, you see the same things repeated over and over again. La familia, it's so, yeah. And even if your family isn't near you, you are going to create one. Yep. And it is extremely important. Now, it isn't just Latin. Of course, you can find this manifested in every culture, but she'll look at me and I'm very waspy. Yeah. And she'll say, how's your dad doing? And I'll say, I have no idea. It's like, what?
That's my household. Jeff is.
How's your mom? I don't know. It's been a week since I talked to her. It doesn't make any sense to her.
Yep. This is. So how is that having children? I'm very curious about this, because I feel like we have such different ideas of family. I mean, could not be more opposite. Whereas I talk to my parents both twice a day, or my dad once a day, my mom twice a day, my sister every day. They're in Chicago, I'm here, but we are like this, like the whole family. Yes. And Jeff goes months and months and months without talking to anyone in his family. And I'm like, are you an alien? Are you okay?
Is he Anglo like me?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I do believe some of this is personality, because look, if you look at the Irish, they're all about family.
Yeah.
and this is Britain, this is people from the same parts of the world, and frankly, a lot of this is a social construct. I could do a
I do
DNA in
think a
me.
lot of it is social. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is, but you are programmed a certain way, and I'm sure you could find Latin folks who aren't as into family, but across the general populations,
It's
you
pretty,
see this.
yeah.
Yes. I believe in our case, because I'm open to learning new things, and because I realized that the family dynamic I grew up with was like most, it was dysfunctional. Everybody was doing the best they could, but a lot of things weren't, a lot of boxes didn't get checked.
Yeah.
And so I'm growing up with ideas that are not good functional ideas if you want to have a good family. So I am open to the flavor that she brings. She is open a little bit to the flavor that I bring. And so, yeah. And so what we've done is, I mean, we're co-parenting, we're working together on creating an atmosphere that is, I think what she definitely brings to the table is there is bottomless unconditional love and affection. And anytime you need it, she's there for it. And I'm very affectionate too. That's one of the connections we made early on, was we were very affectionate with each other, very first date. And what I do is I will sometimes want to push them out of the nest a little bit in ways to make sure that they're learning how to do something on their own. And sometimes it'll seem cold to her, and I'll say, no, trust me on this. They need a little bit of unsupervised experience here. They need to go and encounter something, fall down, skin a knee, get a little bruised. And I think sometimes that doesn't click with her.
Yeah.
And
So
sometimes
it's very not like, at least my experience of a Latin family, like, yeah, which I think it is good. It's a good thing that you're doing, but we didn't, I mean, I didn't grow up being able to like fall and scrape my knee. You know what I mean? It was all like, ay, cuidado, ay, Dios mío, cuidado. You know, everything's just.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say she's necessarily like that far, but she does have more of a I think she wants to keep him a little closer. And I'll want to say, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, come here. All right. You weren't fine, but it's going to be fine. All right. And you're going to, in other words, I'm more of the idea that let them have a little pain to let them know that they'll be okay. Yes. And then in going through that little discomfort, they'll realize, oh, but I'm okay now. So I'm going to be okay next time I get hurt, or next time mentally something doesn't feel good, I'm going to get over it. So we both have the right intentions, and I don't think there's a right or wrong way. Like she's not running around with a chancla, just clocking people with it.
I didn't grow up with a chancla either. I mean, I heard about the chancla. I never experienced the chancla. But I'm curious about you and her family. Do you engage with her family a lot?
Yes. Yeah. Well, also because they're right down the street.
Oh.
She is, I tell her, I think I told you this because we had our like phone call prep talk. This is how I know that you are absolutely bona fide when you talk about you love to talk. I texted you and said, can we talk for 5 minutes? I promise it'll just be 5 minutes. 30 minutes later, you and I are just going on and on. We're talking about ideas. Yeah.
I could talk forever.
Yes. Well, I told her, I said, you're the most American person I know. You're an immigrant. You moved here. You learned the language here. You got any job you could find. And sometimes you would lie about your qualifications to get hired. And before they realized you had lied to them, you had figured out how to do what you were supposed to do. Yeah. And then you moved your whole family here, and everybody lived together. And and then finally, when we got married, and she'd been married once before, but that was her starter marriage. And she realized, okay, that was a mistake. But
starter marriage, moving on, next one.
Exactly. So she was living with her two sisters and her mom and and her niece. And so all in one house. And then when she, obviously, when we got serious, she moved in with me. But you marry that family, and they are going to be a regular part of your life. And so we have invested in keeping them near us. So they're down the street in a house that we rent. Sometimes you're going to feel like some of your life is given to that, but you're also going to have people that have your back no matter what. I mean, they're there to help lift you. Yeah. So you will do the same for them.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's reciprocity, and it's symbiotic. It's like a mutually beneficial relationship. And I think I think culturally, and I guess I can't speak, like I was born in America, but both
Okay.
my parents are Cuban. So
Gotcha.
but culturally I can't speak to like Americans, but like my idea, my perception, what I see of like people that are like American, like
Mhm.
Jeff or whatever, it's like he doesn't really he doesn't understand that you do have to put in the work, but then you do get something so great in
Yeah.
return. And it's hard because my family's in Chicago. So it's like it's a whole different ballpark here. Cause I'm like try to have that closeness, but it's different, because they're far. So
Do you find yourself just trying to find a good Cuban restaurant sometimes just to
I
get that
used to
taste of home?
serve. I was a waitress up until the pandemic
Mhm.
started at El Cochinito in Silver Lake, which is a Cuban restaurant that's been open since 1988.
Okay.
So, and it's great.
All
So
right.
yeah, I eat that sometimes to feel like I'm at home, but
Rincon Criollo I think it's near Culver City.
uh-huh,
My wife found that one. She used to go there all the time, and we
never been there.
still occasionally get food from there. And she says it's amazing. But I have a feeling if she lived near where you lived, she would have found that one.
Yeah, El Cochinito is like, it's definitely one of the best Cuban places in LA. LA is not a super Cuban city. Yeah, it's not a Cuban city. We don't have a lot of good Cuban food here, but anyone in the Silver Lake area should check out El Cochinito. And they have
Okay.
Café Tropical, which is down the street, which is a coffee shop, and they also have Cuban pastries and stuff, and it's really good.
I wish that I'm up outside of LA. I'm in an exurb. I wish that we had a tapas place.
Oh,
Yeah.
he really wants to play.
Yeah, she does. She doesn't like, I don't know, mama's in a conversation. Well,
But yeah, you were saying you're in a
well, I was actually curious, are your parents first generation? Did they grow up in Cuba and move here?
yeah, so I call myself like it's like 1.5 generation. So my
Okay.
mom was the youngest of three, and she was born in the States right after my
Okay.
grandma got here,
All right.
like right after. And then my dad was born in the States, and then they went right back to Cuba, and then he lived there for some of his childhood, and then they came back to the States. So they're both like, they're both very, very Cuban.
Okay.
They were like, raised speaking Spanish, and then they learned English, obviously. And like Spanish was my first language at home. Had an accent when I spoke English when I was little, but then, yeah. So it's like, it's technically second generation. I'm second generation.
One of the commonalities we have is that, okay, we're in this game and we'll spend a couple of minutes talking about it because, like I said, you don't really know anything about the game. I'll tell you a little bit about it.
Tell me.
One of the things Apex Legends is known for is it has an incredibly diverse array of characters. Characters that are non-binary, that are trans, that are I mean, on the sexuality scale, are at all points of the compass. And I don't know if this was as by design as some people think it is. I think they just decided, let's have a game that reflects society as much as we possibly can. Now, there are only 21 or 22 characters, so you can't proportionately represent all those groups. You just have to bring them in wherever you can.
Yeah.
So I'm cool with that. I'm a fan of that. It's like, look, first of all, it's your game. You make it the way you want to make it. People will enjoy or not enjoy it. But you have unwittingly been cast in a game that reflects a little bit what we're talking about. Perhaps people, if they just got to know someone a little bit, they would have a different perspective on life. And one of the values I think these characters bring into the game is that they allow people who would never even think about this to see the world on different terms, on terms that affect a lot of other people.
Yeah,
So,
that's beautiful.
what did they tell you about the character of Vantage? How were you, I mean, did you connect with the character on any kind of personal level, or was this just pure performance for you?
No, I did. I really did. Oh my gosh. I knew that she was Latina and that she grew up with her mom, Xiomara, like away from society.
Okay.
So she kind of was raised like with not around other people. So, and she was really like tough and kind of her mom taught her how to like fend for herself. And So she's a badass. And then her mom gets captured, and then basically Vantage is trying to like get her mom out of prison and save her life. And that's kind of the whole setup. Vantage is socially a little bit weird because she didn't grow up around a lot of people. So like jokes and stuff are new to her. It's funny because I'd been cast in a role similar personality wise before. And I'm like, I guess I read this way. I don't know.
Is there something when I walk through the door that they pick up on?
Yeah. But I found that really funny, like her dry sense of humor, her like trying to figure out what is a joke, and like, and then she's also very blunt and direct, which I don't know if you can pick up on this from an hour and a half of, Zooming, but like I'm very direct and like blunt, and I don't try to be mean at all, but like I definitely related to Vantage in that way, and just her love for her mother and family. And there's a lot about Vantage that oh my God, of course, also echo. Like you saw my cat. I have a cat who's like literally constantly on me, and he's like everything to me. So I was like, oh my God, it's meant to be. I have a little animal that's like my cat. And just their relationship. So yeah, I truly did love Vantage from the start. And I've had such a blast crafting her as a character and just kind of getting to know her and finding her,
Have you done many video games before, or was this something?
This was my first video game. I'm not a voice actor.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'd done one line in the Mitchells versus the Machines that Jeff directed. And I just live action stuff, lots of commercials and live action things. So yeah, no, it was honestly like I got the audition from my agent at the time, and I was like, a video game, and it was undisclosed, the name of it. And I was like, I don't, whatever. And then I almost forgot, turned it in 20 minutes before it was due, which is incredibly not like me. I'm very type A with auditions and stuff, but I was like, oh no. And then I got a call back. And the callback was a Zoom callback, and it was actually really fun. I was surprised. I was taken aback by how engaged I felt and like how much fun I had working with them. And I was like, oh man, I hope I get this. And then I got it. And then I had a meeting with Terry, the casting director, and then all of the people that were a part of this. And they're like, okay, we're going to tell you what you booked. You booked Apex Legends. And I was like, cool. And they're like, you don't know what that is. And I was like, well, I'm so sorry. They're like, it's a really big game. Like it's a good thing for you. And I was like, I'm so happy. But I could see how everyone was just like, really, lady?
You won an Emmy. Is that a thing? It's a thing. It is kind of a thing. Yeah. Okay. I hear you. When they were I like you. I auditioned, I sent it off, I didn't think about it. And then I got a call back, and this was in 2018, I believe. So I went in to Warner Brothers for the callback. The callback was a lot of fun. Just like you say, these are really fun people.
They really are.
Game.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of games. This is the easiest video game you will ever do, because you're not screaming your bloody head off. It's usually different when you're combat-oriented video games. Everything's very intense and loud, and it can take a toll on you. So we're busy having a great time. And they said, okay, this takes place in the TitanFall universe. And there was this expectant pause. And I said, I don't know what that is. Are you familiar with TitanFall? No. Titanfall 2? Even less. No, I'm so sorry. I really don't know. And my usual fallback is I have kids. I don't have time. And they said, cool, no problem. Let us describe this to you. And no matter how well they describe it, you're never quite prepared for what it's going to actually look like.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've at least seen some video of your character, how she interacts with others, the breadth and scope of the world they've created. And
amazing.
Yeah. And the upside of this as well is that you're going to continue to record new things, because they develop her arc, they deepen the character, and they really spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah. And I love that. I mean, it was I just went back in whenever that was. I think we all went in,
Yeah, a
right?
couple of weeks
And
back.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, Vantage. It just
Yeah.
made me so happy because there she was. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
yeah.
And more they're going to build. I think they're going to build these characters out more. Like Pathfinder's been built out a lot. He's season 0. So there's Pathfinder swag, and I've got there's an heirloom he has, and there's costumes and all that stuff. And there's even a book. So I'm the
Wow.
beneficiary of season 0. You're season, I believe, 14.
Wow.
So 13 or 14. Yeah. So you're coming in later, but that just means that in time you're going to see more and more stuff representing Vantage. And
Yeah.
I hope somebody makes like a little stuffed bat that you can have.
Me too.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Somebody might watch this and say, I'm going to make her a stuffed bat. I'm going to 3D print her a bat. Let's put it this way. There are people who restore old cars who use 3D printers now to make whatever part they need.
You're kidding me.
Used to be you'd have to go to a junkyard.
Yeah.
And you'd have to find the part. Like, look, you're Cuban. Your father probably told you this. Every car in Cuba is.
My father told me I saw them. Yeah, no, they're all
vintage 50s.
And they're all pieced together by all these old parts because they're all falling apart. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, but if you have a 3D printer, you can just print out the part you need, pop it in. You got yourself a working part.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
That breaks my brain.
Technology, you're going to be integrating it into something, whatever it is. Well, that actually brings the question then, what are you working on these days? Is it something you're creating yourself or?
Good question. I don't know. I trying to get my next short film off the ground. That would require me to make a choice about what it's going to be.
Oh, you're not sure about the topic?
Yeah, no, I've got like so many different things, and like I'll be like, okay, this is what I'm going to shoot, and then I'll be like, and then I'll rewrite it, and then I'll be like, no, this is what I'm going to shoot, and so I'm kind of in that terrible place where it's like, I need a deadline, but I need a deadline that's like real, you know.
How did you decide before on the other, like the last project you did?
I had a deadline. Where I take acting class, where I've been for years. They had a film festival and there was a like coming, and then the submission date existed. Right. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to make an official short film for this. And so I had a date, and it meant something to me. You know, it wasn't just like it wasn't like fake accountability. It was like real. That really helped. So yeah, I've been like learning a lot about just camera stuff, aperture and cinematography, basically, because that's an area of it all that I don't know a lot about. And like we were saying at the beginning, like I'm trying to be able to know a little bit of everything so I'm able to do my own things. Yeah. So I've been like making little things at home. I've been shooting on a Super 8 camera, and there's footage. We were in Paris, so I shot a bunch of stuff on Super 8. And we got it developed. It's digitally developed, and it's like, we have it and working on it in Premiere Pro, but it's so slow going because I don't really know how to use Premiere Pro. So it's just, but I also have audio that we recorded in Paris. So I'm basically like piecing together a short film from that currently. And I would really like to set a date to shoot my next one. And then, I just today officially released my first short film, La Mesa, the table. Like it was private on Vimeo for a long time. And I like put it out publicly so anyone can watch it, which is scary and exciting. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you, how does it feel to release publicly something that clearly, it's a piece of you, you're putting it out there, and you're hoping enough people see it. You're hoping that people see it and get what you're trying to do. Yeah.
Like I went so slow. Like it was very private with it and only showed a few people, and then film festival. And then I got to see it in front of an audience because it got into the festival, and that was horrible. I was like shaking, and
that's gotta be nerve wracking.
Oh my goodness. I'm like, are they going to laugh? Are they going to, because there were jokes, and they did. Oh my God. The audience received it really well. It couldn't have gone better, honestly. but that doesn't take away the like nausea I feel when thinking about like anyone could just watch it and like have whatever opinion, and that's fine. But I don't do it so everyone loves it. But I it's vulnerable. Yeah, it's a piece of me, and it's not perfect because it's my first thing, and I have to be okay with that. Like I have to just be okay with making things that aren't perfect, you know?
Yes. I started in stand-up comedy. And
cool.
I mean, I started acting in stand-up comedy right around the same time I was in college. And you get an interesting dichotomy when you're doing acting and stand-up simultaneously. Acting is communal. And more often than not, you're a part of a group. So if it doesn't go well, there's some deflection. There's somebody else is taking the blow with you.
Yeah.
If you're doing stand-up, you're writing it, you're producing it, you're directing it, all of it, and it's just you up there. And there's usually a personal facet to it. When they laugh, they're laughing because they approve of you in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
They're not laughing, they're rejecting you.
Mm-hmm.
And you begin to see the difference between acting and stand-up in that regard. They're very similar in many other ways. And after a while, you get better at dealing with the rejection, but it still hurts. It's still rough. And there are times, like I've been a part of productions as an actor that didn't really go well, but it's okay. I had some people in it with me. You shrug it off. I've had sets that didn't go well, and you just want to crawl under a rock. It can be brutal. But on the other side of the coin, when it goes great, you feel like Superman. I mean, it is an elation that is hard to define. And I can imagine that creating something, shooting it, editing it, post-producing it, putting it up, and then watching to see how people take it would almost feel more like stand-up than it does being a part of an ensemble.
Yeah, I think so. I think, God, we're just gonna have to see, because I don't know. I think I'm like intellectually, I'm like, well, I want to be cool, like, Jean-Luc Godard, and be like, whatever. The audience is a part of it. And if they don't get what they are supposed to get out of it, that's on them, but like, I am a very sensitive person. So I don't know. I don't really know. Currently I'm kind of like, if some people, I've already had friends that I could tell really like got it and loved it. And then I've had friends that I could tell didn't like it, but they were trying to be nice. And it burns a little bit, but deep down, I'm kind of like, I think it's great. So it doesn't really matter,
Well, that leads to the idea of, I think we discussed this briefly when we were on the phone, the auteur theory, that the film, no matter what it's about, no matter who's in it, no matter how it's made, is going to be more the director's vision than anyone else's, because it's impossible for the director's hand not to be felt. The screenplay can be shot in such a way that the words are transformed, but the director's hand, now this is a disputed theory, it's a controversial theory, everyone has different opinions on it, but you talk about Godard, who full disclosure, I've never seen a full Godard film. I certainly know who he is. The only Bergman film I've seen, I know that's, oh, Klutz the Pearls. How can you have, I know. I've seen one Bergman film. Yeah, I've seen one Bergman film. I saw the Seventh Seal. And which, if you're going to see a Bergman film, you got to see that.
I haven't seen that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you say Godard was kind of whatever about how his films were received.
Not whatever, but more just like he believed that the audience was an active part of it. Like they had to actively participate in it in order to get what they needed out of it.
Gotcha. So in other words, he probably only would have been upset or disappointed if they had been indifferent, I would think, if they had not really.
I don't know if he ever really got upset is the thing, because he was also a film critic. He started as a film critic, and he was he's like, well, it is what it is,
Okay. Whereas Bergman, if I remember this correctly, I could be wrong and frequently am, Bergman would get upset if his movies were not received well, and he didn't like critics if they didn't get it, to the point where he actually punched a critic once.
That sounds
and this is a revered filmmaker who you would think would just not give a shit if people got it or not. But he gave many shits. So everyone is different about this. I see Tarantino, whose work I enjoy.
Yeah.
And some movies more than others. But I enjoy what he does. And I enjoy the fact that he just gives you everything he's got for every movie. Whether you like it, whether you hate it, you're getting him. And he stands by his cast. He is all in, to the point where if you don't get it, he'll say, okay, yeah, okay, that's cool. You're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. Okay. But if you misinterpret it, that's where he really gets pissed off.
Then there's David Lynch, who I love, and he makes things that people don't get all the time. And he's like, no, that's not it. But he's not going to explain it for you. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, he's a transcendental meditation kind of guy. I have a feeling.
Yeah. I learned transcendental meditation because I'm such a big David Lynch fan.
Yeah, he's talked about that. He said, I'll go in, and that's what he talks about. He says, I'll go in. He gets into this meditative state, and he goes in almost where he's talking about just going down a well and in a nice, comfortable state. He's just disappeared. Says, if I get a creative idea, I'll come out, I'll write it down, and then I'll go back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very
like fish. Yeah.
He's a very centered dude. Whereas you have people like Tarantino, where I don't think he's wired to meditate. I don't think he has it in him to sit still.
Yeah.
You know? No. Yeah. Whereas you also talk about how Lynch knows the kind of movies he makes. So the audience can take or leave them. Another guy who was like that was Robert Altman. Robert Altman.
I love Shortcuts. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
Yes, I have. I've actually seen several Robert Altman films. I've seen Nashville. I've seen Shortcuts. I've seen The Player. I've seen McCabe and Mrs. Miller, MASH. I mean, there are some brilliant movies there, but they're not movies people are expecting to see. And he was asked about that. He said, oh, and I've also seen Gosford Park. And he was asked about that. How come Hollywood doesn't always embrace what you do? And he says, they make shoes, I make gloves.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I would think that if you know yourself enough, that when you make something, you tell yourself, all right, maybe I made a shoe. I have no idea. I might have made a glove. But if I can recognize that, then the audience is going to do what they're going to do with it. And the ability to accept the response, however it adheres to what you were hoping for, I would say that's going to determine the work you do after that. Because sometimes it can leave a skid mark on you.
Yeah, I think you have to know why you're making the work and what your goal is. And I definitely don't see myself being like a director of any kind of like big Hollywood blockbuster. That does not appeal to me.
Right.
Do I see myself being like a director of like episodic TV? Like I'm not trying to make shoes. I don't want to make shoes. It doesn't appeal to me. But I do want to make my own thing. And like, I think, you have to know whose opinions matter to you, like who you respect. Don't take the opinion of people. So, you can take other people's opinions, but remember to take opinions with a grain of salt. Like,
right. If you were to get, I mean, directing a big Hollywood blockbuster is a different skill set, because I've had the privilege of working in voice acting for a long time now, and I've done ADR for a lot of big movies. And sometimes the director of the movie will come in and direct the ADR. Whoa. And you're sitting there talking to somebody who is almost always very intelligent. You're in a room with somebody that has a command of a certain kind of organization and narrative and moving parts. And then if you were to hand off a production like that to somebody who only makes really tiny things, they would probably need an extra AD just to figure out how they were going to manage the day.
Yeah, but also it's a taste thing, right? Because that's what I'm talking about. It's like taste. It's like the stuff that big studios want does not align with my taste 99% of the time. Like I'm not impressed by these directors that can do these things. Like I their command, that's great. But artistically speaking, I'm like, it just does not do it for me. And I'm like, well, Film is a medium that is full of possibility. And all I see over and over again with these big budget things that, there are some great films that come out every year, of course, but the general, like the status quo is like, we just do not push the form. It's a formula and we just do things, cut exactly where, it's all like, it's so boring.
Well, it's algorithmic.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not interested in that.
Well, you can think of them as quadrant films, because if you know the industry parlance, this is a 4-quadrant film. What the hell is that? Old people, young people, girls, boys. All right. Everybody likes this. It's a 4-quadrant film. And it can become its own worst enemy, because a Marvel movie now has to make $1 billion at the box office to be profitable. Just because they cost so much money, they have to make $1 billion worldwide. And so when you're making a Marvel film, you realize that I don't want quirky if quirky takes us out of the 4 quadrants, because there's too much money on the line. And so there are so many hands in the kitchen at that point, that if there's an auteur there, that voice is going to be crushed very, very quickly.
Yes.
What I have seen is occasionally you'll see somebody make a striking first film that is personal and it's small, but they get it. They get the human truth of it, and it moves the audience. And it never is a big hit, but they'll come up, and next thing you know, they're making a very big movie. I think Ryan Coogler directed Black Panther. Well, I think his first movie was Fruitvale Station, which is nothing like Black Panther. And so to be able to go from one to the other is a real skill that I think I know I wouldn't have it. But I look at somebody who only makes small films. That guy's never going to make a Marvel film.
Right.
He can't bring his signature to a Marvel film.
Yeah.
Like the largest I've seen somebody scale up and still retain every ounce of their artistic voice is Paul Thomas Anderson, I think, can scale up. And he's another one of the 3 name guys. He did the Grand Budapest.
Wes Anderson?
Wes Anderson. All right, he's not a 3 name guy, but Wes Anderson can make Bottle Rocket and the Grand Budapest Hotel, and they have the same kind of vibe. They're very quirky. You may get it, you may not get it, but one has a much larger budget than the other. One has a bunch of big stars, the other doesn't. And yet they're the same vision. They're the same feel.
Yeah, and yet they're both wildly inspired, especially by French New Wave film. His stuff is so like French New Wave inspired.
Well, yeah. Then I guess you must have seen the French Dispatch.
I tried to watch it. I did not like it.
It is a harder movie to access because it is gorgeous to look at.
It's gorgeous to look at. Incredibly shot, beautifully made. Yeah.
And it was hard for me. A lot of times you need the cinematic language to talk about what you're seeing. But when I saw Rushmore, that was the movie most of us get into Wes Anderson with, but he made Bottle Rocket before that. And those are really fun movies.
Yeah.
And they're also, I think, really accessible. You can walk in off the street. There's a way for you to connect with that. And when you're watching the French Dispatch, and I had the same, I still enjoy the French Dispatch. There was enough for me there to keep me involved. He makes dioramas. His camera work is very static. He doesn't like to move the camera. I don't know if he does a zoom ever. If he does, it's very
it is very static. It is very much like a dollhouse. Yeah.
He moves left to right. He loves to move back and forth, but he will put you in frame and he will just lock it in, and he will do he'll cut back and forth. But for the most part, I don't think he wants I don't think he wants to influence you with camera moves. I think he wants it to be right in one spot, and it's a diorama with people talking, and even their performances tend to be very restrained.
Yes.
And you definitely see this with you see it with Rushmore, but you also see it with The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
God, I love that movie. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. And even when he's at sea, and you would think, oh, he's out at sea, there's got to be a lot of movement. No.
Yeah.
He bolts that camera down and he'll move it a little bit, but he wants you watching the people on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that to me is interesting, because here's a guy who knows what his style is, and that's what he makes. Where if you compare him to Paul Thomas Anderson, his camera is moving
And I love it. And I love the camera work. I mean, I loved Licorice Pizza. A lot of people didn't. I loved it. And I love a lot of PTA films. And yeah, the camera, it's incredible. I'm always like, oh my God, I want to do that.
Yeah. And he also shoots with a certain film stock too. I think he is absolutely in love with film stock. I think from the 70s and maybe early 80s. There's it's not grainy, but there's just a quality to it.
He likes film, which
yes.
Yes.
So
Where
he likes them
shooting digitally now.
Yeah, I think he's in love with things feeling cinematic, and to the point where you don't see any mailed in performances in his movies. He would rather get a big emotional performance from you rather than something being restrained, and the music follows the same cues.
But it's still very human. It's never like, I never feel like the performances he gets out of people are stylized. Like,
no, I think he likes crescendos. I think he likes, yeah.
But it's all so I mean, I feel like he loves people, like, and that's what his filmmaking tells me. Like, he loves people, and he like lets that be the driver of so much.
What did you think of Magnolia?
I saw it and I fell in love with film in high school when I went to an arts high school for junior and senior year. And I took a literature through film class. And that was one of the first movies I saw in that class. And that's when I was like, oh my God, movies are so much more. They don't have to just be like, things that you eat popcorn at the movie. Like they're film. Oh my God, film. So it was one of those things that did that for me. I mean, I was just like, I remember being taken aback by it. I rewatched it a few years ago. I thought it was really powerful and sad and human and empathetic toward even like the most flawed character.
Right. Like, I think, and then, I mean, the third act, it literally rains frogs.
It rains frogs.
Yeah. It's a lot to process. So anyone who's thinking, oh, I can't watch that movie now. No, see it, because it's going to take you on a journey. You may or may not like the characters in it, but each of them are having to work through traumatic, what's a good word for it? They're all at crossroads in their lives.
Yeah.
Everyone's about to make or encounter a very big decision. And it's a lot, but it, like you say, it invests very heavily in who they are as people. He would rather have you spend a lot of time with these characters to get to know them before, anything approaching resolution comes along.
Action. Yeah, it's really more the exploration.
If that was the first movie you saw of his, then you must have seen Boogie Nights at some point.
Of course, I've seen Boogie Nights. Yeah, it's a while.
Yeah, which is very interesting. Two of the main characters in the movie, or two of the main lead actors in the movie, don't talk about the movie anymore. Like, Mark Wahlberg, basically, I think, he knows what the movie did for him.
Yeah.
All right. It did a lot for him. Burt Reynolds didn't want to do the movie and didn't even like the movie after it was done. He says, I like me in it. And I'm always fascinated by that. When I see this movie that is among the best things that either of those actors will ever be associated with. And Burt Reynolds has made some good movies. He's underrated. Yeah. But Mark Wahlberg, mainly, he's made some good movies too, but he's also gone to the bank quite a bit with some of his choices. I'm thinking, this is a movie that made it possible for you to be taken seriously on
as an artist
level. Because he's got it in him to give that kind of performance. And I always find that fascinating, because sometimes an actor, I think, maybe doesn't see what they're a part of. Even after it's out, maybe they don't see what it really means.
I agree. And I am so envious of actors that get to work with like phenomenal directors. Like, that's obviously a goal of mine. And, I am an actor but I really want to work with, like, I want to be a part of art and making art, and like, want to work with creative people. I want to be a part of that. And I think a lot of people do get to be a part of those really great, exciting projects. And like you said, they don't even sometimes see what they are a part of. So
it can be, sometimes there are some actors that get it. Although there are other times when Tommy Lee Jones apparently famously said to Joe Pantoliano when they were making The Fugitive, Joe Pantoliano said, Tommy Lee Jones comes up to me and says, hey, I want you to find out where all the good restaurants are around this town, where all the good night spots are to hang out with afterwards, because this movie ain't going to win any awards, so we may as well have some fun. And the guy wins an Oscar.
Yeah, that's
Sometimes,
hilarious.
and Tommy Lee is one of the smartest guys in Hollywood.
Hmm.
And sometimes you just don't see it.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating. Also, surely then you have seen Hard Eight. That's Anderson's first film.
I haven't.
Oh, you gotta see Hard Eight.
Yeah.
That's John C. Reilly. That's let's see, Philip Seymour Hoffman's got a cameo in it. Gwyneth Paltrow, and the lead, he just passed away. He was one of the leads in Magnolia, and I can't remember the actor's name. It's a great movie. Samuel L. Jackson's in it, and it is entirely character driven. But as you're watching it, you also see a Scorsese influence in the way he moves the camera and the way he describes how certain things work in casinos. And it's just really interesting to see these different influences manifest in another generation of filmmaker. Meanwhile, Scorsese is still out making films, still out pushing it as much as he can push it.
Yeah.
So, do you have a favorite director? Somebody who, no matter what, you're there for it?
David Lynch, probably. Yeah.
Really? Has he ever made anything where you just think, I mean, Dune, I'm sure, is probably where you realized, all right, fine. You got a paycheck. You wanted to push yourself a little bit.
He was unhappy with it though, because
he
didn't get final cut. I just watched for the first time Inland Empire, which is crazy that I had not seen it. It's one of his most recent films, and it's really out there. It was a lot. It took a lot for me to get through that. I was really? Like, wow. Yeah, have you seen it?
No, the last Lynch movie I saw, like, I'm familiar enough with his work because I've seen a few of his movies. Like I saw Wild at Heart in the theater with a bunch of college students, because I was in college at the time. And you sometimes know how a movie is going over on an audience as you're watching it. And I could tell half of the people in this audience have no idea what they're watching.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, and they are not here for it. And the other half, I was having a great time because it was just visceral. He doesn't need to make sense sometimes. He just wants to make you feel something.
Yeah.
React.
To him, it makes sense. I feel like from the interviews I've heard, like he's like, no, there's like, I think it's easy to think like a lot of people think like, oh, he's just being weird or he just wants this or that. But he has a lot of calculated reasons. If it's like, if we get it, but we don't always get it. But yeah, his work is just inventive and exciting, and it always makes me feel something. And Mulholland Drive is one of the best movies ever made, I think. And
I was going to mention that one.
It's definitely like one of the best movies of all time. And yeah, I love the way he thinks about art, and he's just inspires me. And I love the performances he gets out of people. They're very different they're not supernatural. Like there's like there's like a stylized element to the performances he brings out of people. And I think it's just really cool. I just recently watched a Tarkovsky film. He's a Russian director. This movie Stalker. It's a great film. Stalker is an incredible film, but it's not for the faint of heart. Like at first you have to get through a lot to get there, and it's kind of like this tedious watch, but it's also like very experiential. And I really enjoy things that push the form, that aren't just doing the same thing. Again, Godard is one of my favorites. Just like, he's never resting on his laurels and just like doing what's easy and telling the most simple story. Like he's using the medium that he has to actually play instead of just be basic with it. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's like, do a jump cut. Like, let's move the camera in a different way. He takes risks and he tries things. And some movies, like I watched The Weekend recently by Godard, and it wasn't one of my favorite Godard films, but it was one of the best ones because it was crazy and it was so inventive. And so, yeah, I really appreciate things that push the form and like don't stay stagnant in like this idea of what a movie has to be, you know?
Do you have I typically, when somebody asks me my favorite movie, I give them 3. But I'll elevate one above the other 2 if I have to. And it's always a very personal choice. But do you have I mean, Mulholland Drive, you mentioned.
It's
Is there
one of my
another movie
favorites.
is there another movie that's up there that you'll just, if you want to know who I am, watch this movie, or if you want to know what I like, watch this movie?
I would say like Un Femme by Godard or Breathless by Godard are two of my top films. Mulholland Drive, Eyes Without a Face, which is also a French film. I don't even remember who the director of that is. It's old, is one of my favorites. It's basic, but I love the 400 Blows by Truffaut.
Mhm.
I used to love the movie Amores Perros by Iñárritu, the
Mhm.
director, but I recently tried to rewatch it and it was just way too violent for me. I literally was like, I guess I have a weak stomach now. I could not get through it. But yeah, those are some of my favorites, but I'm not a very like, I don't like boil it down ever. I just watched In the Mood for Love, which is a Chinese movie from the early 2000s, but it's based in the 60s. And that was probably one of the most beautifully shot films I've ever seen. So that's my not answer.
Still, that's a pretty big list,
Yeah.
and not a single American film among them.
No, Mulholland Drive. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Well, I started leaving that one out. And even
No,
then,
no. It's definitely one of my favorites of all time for sure.
yeah, I mean, yeah, technically you have to call that an American film, but it's so outside the
Yeah.
industry that we know. It's so outside the product that comes down the pipe that there's been very little that seems to have connected with you when it's made conventionally.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, not
What
just
about movies that become comfort food for so many people, culturally speaking, that are perhaps still a little bit outside the envelope, but they're still they're still products of the system. Like one of the ones I would think of is The Princess Bride. Have you ever seen The Princess Bride?
yeah, I don't like that movie.
You don't like The
My
Princess
sister's
Bride?
favorite movie, but it's not for me. Yeah.
Really? So what is it about it? It just didn't land for you.
I tried watching it when I was younger and I just couldn't do it.
Just wasn't for you.
Not for me. Yeah.
Okay,
It's
gotcha.
not that I don't like any conventional films. I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, it's an interesting exercise. But I tell you what, I'll give you some of my very favorite films ever, and I'm probably going to get head shakes from you. But let's see. If I had to choose, my favorite film of all time would be Lawrence of Arabia.
Never seen it.
Yeah, I think it's a stunning movie. But if you see it, you have to see it cinematically. If you can see it in a theater, do. And if you can see the 70 millimeter print, see it. It's an incredibly well-written screenplay, and it is epic in every sense of the word. And it is ultimately a tragic story. The personal journey is right there for you to see, but it's painted on such a large canvas. But it is not it's not a cast of thousands. There are two or three really notable characters in it. Everybody else is flitting in and out of frame, but it tells a very, very small personal story on an extremely large canvas. The other two would be Chariots of Fire, which was never seen it. Okay. Again, it was a British film, and films made in the British industry usually you'll see like in the opening credits, you'll see like 5 different production companies because that's what it took to get it made. It was a small film, and it had to do with personal decisions that athletes had to make based on true events. And that won Best Picture back in 1981. It was kind of seen as a big upset, but it's an extremely inspiring film. And the third one is Last of the Mohicans, which is entirely movie studio product, but it's Michael Mann, who I think is a really, really good filmmaker. And it is a visceral movie. It is excellent at just socking you in the gut and making you feel something. And it is told with big sweeping action sequences, gorgeous cinematography, and absolutely fantastic soundtrack. But the entire time you're watching it, you're watching a popcorn film. But as an exercise, I would be curious as to what your reaction is to those films if you were ever to see them.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of them. I mean, there are popcorn films I love. It's just escaping, like Sunset Boulevard, but that's like old.
That's 1950.
Yeah.
And even that was a challenging movie because I mean, it starts with the death of the lead.
Yeah.
of the narrator.
Yeah.
He's sitting there narrating as you're watching his body float in a pool.
So you're saying it's still weird. Yes. There's oh, I had it. Oh, I mean, I love Vertigo, Hitchcock films.
Hitchcock.
Those are amazing films, but they're a little more mainstream.
They can still be challenging in their own way. Like Vertigo. Vertigo is well, look, I'm giving you props here.
Rear Window is actually probably my favorite of his films.
That is a really great movie. It is not just, I mean, he made psychological movies, but there were these amazing technical exercises. But if you didn't really get into the thought process of the people wrapped up in them, they wouldn't hit you the same way. So if you look at Vertigo, that is, I mean, that's been a highly controversial film of his, because critics often choose that as the greatest film ever made. Usually, a lot of times they'll put that above things like Truffaut and Godard, and those films that sit usually near the top of those lists. Vertigo has been chosen before, and a lot of critics have very strong reactions to that movie. And I think it's because of the obsession that the main character is sort of enduring. And it's almost a very possessive obsessiveness. It's a stalker, just about.
Yeah. But it's not necessarily like condoning that, right? It's just telling the story.
No, but it gets you into his head. Yeah. Well, that's another interesting question, is when you're watching a character, you talked about this with Magnolia, even if you don't like the characters or agree with their choices, it's getting you emotionally involved in the movie because you want to see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, if it's done well, if it's performed well, directed well, written well, characters that you would think like off the cuff would be unsavory and you wouldn't care about, you get invested in them. And that to me is like really effective filmmaking and acting. It really does. Also, a lot of it comes down to the acting, but a lot of acting really comes down to good directing. So, yeah.
I remember Paul Newman was asked about what he thought of the Oscars, and he thought, he understands what they were. They're business. Warren Beatty once said that the Golden Globes are fun. The Oscars are business. He understood that's how the industry works. Yeah. Paul Newman said, they give Oscars to the best movie, but maybe sometimes the best movie is one where everything was going wrong and the director had to pull himself up or herself up by her bootstraps and make something out of very little. Other times they give an Oscar for best performance, but what about the actor who is surrounded by mediocre performances, but they somehow elevate everybody?
Like Florence Pugh in Don't Worry, Darling.
I have not seen that movie, but I'm fascinated by it.
Missing out, but her performance is she's incredible. So I loved what was that horror film that she was in?
Midsommar.
Yeah, I love Midsommar.
I have not. I've only seen parts of it. I've read about what is involved in it, and I thought, I don't know if I can watch this happen.
Yeah, I can't do too much horror, but I loved that film, and mostly because I was obsessed with her performance. I mean, she is. Okay. Yeah, she exactly. Some actors they don't even get the credit for that they deserve because they carry a film. Yeah. And even if the film isn't great, like I did not personally like Don't Worry, Darling. I thought it was very bad, but I thought her performance was wow. I was really impressed with what she did with it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Are you able to, I am the kind of person who absolutely separates the art from the artist. I care very little about who a person is in their private life. Even if they're front and center all the time with their private life, I can usually separate that out completely and watch their performance or listen to their music. So
I mean, I don't want to give the politically incorrect answer of same, but that's same. Yeah, like I just watched a Roman Polanski film the other night. I don't know if that makes me a bad person, but it was really incredible. The Tenant. Have you seen that?
No, I have not seen The Tenant, but you are an awful person. No, look,
I know.
I was watching. Chinatown it's an amazing film. Right. It's an amazing film.
Inarguably great. Yeah.
Rosemary's Baby. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I know Roman Polanski is probably an awful person, right? But you are stuck with Rosemary's Baby every October. Okay. And that movie is a goddamn classic.
It is a classic. Yeah.
It is so good that people mistakenly think, oh, this is a horror movie. No, not really. It's a suspenseful movie.
Yes.
It's a psychological drama. And yes, there is going to be a moment near the end where you're probably going to be a little bit terrified. But Charles Grodin wrote in his autobiography about working with Roman Polanski. And he said, yeah, he was a difficult guy to work with, but I saw how genius he was. One scene in particular, there's a scene where I think it's Mia Farrow is talking on the phone. He puts the camera outside the bedroom. She's sitting on the bed talking on the phone. And he says, I was there on the day and I was watching him. And I said, why are you putting the camera there? You can only see half of her in frame. Shouldn't you see all of her? And he said, no. And then I realized why he did it. When I saw the movie screen for an audience, everyone in the audience watching the scene where you can only see her halfway in frame is doing this.
Yep. Yeah.
And he thought, my God, that's genius.
Well, you feel the sense of her being watched. We feel like voyeurs.
Right.
You're putting us in the perspective. You're like making, it's
There.
incredible filmmaking.
Put
Yeah.
you right there. And yes, and I can name off the top of my head 10 Woody Allen films that I think are absolutely brilliant. And I know he's a very controversial person. And don't even get me started on that whole story, but I can objectively show you 10 Woody Allen films that I think are just fucking hysterical and brilliantly made.
Yeah.
And
I've never really watched Woody Allen films. I know, which is kind of crazy given my whole like persona that I'm like, I love film. But I just never did. And then I saw Midnight in Paris and then I loved it. And I watched it 4 times in theaters. And then, but then I rewatched it recently, right before I went to Paris, because I was like, I wonder if this holds up. And I found it very sexist.
I actually, of his movies, like Midnight in Paris is one that I don't think he phoned it in, but I think that it's one that doesn't stand up as well because, for starters, the Rachel McAdams character, I thought, that's just lazy writing. Why did you make her so strident and so one-dimensional just so this guy could have an excuse to wander off?
Yeah.
Make her a real person, right?
Yeah.
She didn't seem real to me. It seemed
all the women in it were props for the male character. Is the thing, including the women at the end. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought, you know what? This is a really fun idea. It's a really fun idea.
Romantic idea.
Yeah. I thought that was fun, but it didn't, whereas if you see, like, if you want to watch a movie of his that is disposable yet really fun, Manhattan Murder Mystery.
Okay.
It's a very fun movie. It is light as air, but it's got one of my favorite lines of his where they suspect the person down the hall has murdered his wife. And Diane Keaton is saying that our next door neighbor is a serial killer. And Woody Allen's response is, well, New York is a melting pot.
Yeah.
And this, it's just a toss-off line of his. But if you want to, the thing about Woody Allen's films is you can find 3 or 4 different kinds of them. So if you want to watch like his early satire, you watch, say, Sleeper. If you want to watch more of his deeper examinations of character with some really good comedy, watch Crimes and Misdemeanors, which might be his best movie to me. If you want to watch a straight up drama and a suspenseful movie, watch Match Point, which is almost Hitchcockian in the way he turns the screws. And then if you want to watch something that is just flat out funny as shit, what is it? Bullets Over Broadway. Just really, really funny and with great performances. So, and that's just within a, I don't know, maybe a 10-year time frame. Well,
you need a ton of film.
Sleeper is early 70s. So yeah. Somebody that personally, I have no idea what I would think of him if I knew him. And I know there's been a lot of takes on him and his life, but I can just sit there and watch one of his movies. Watch The Sweet and Lowdown with Sean Penn. Yeah, Sean Penn gives one of his very best performances in that movie. Yeah, and it's amazing. And Sean Penn's a guy that polarizes people. Yeah, but I'll just watch whatever he's in. I think he's amazing.
Yeah, I know we're not supposed to do that anymore, but I unfortunately do.
I think that people would I guess we'll take this full circle and then I'll let you go because it's been a while.
Yeah, my computer's dying. I probably have like 2 minutes until.
Okay. I think that people would do well to just let other people be human and look at intention more than anything else. If somebody's deliberately trying to troll, fine. You can treat them with some contempt. But if somebody's being honest and they mean well and they're just trying to do their thing, you can by all means disagree.
Yeah.
Register your disappointment, your disapproval, protest. But I still think that you have to let other people like what they like.
To a degree, to a certain extent, I agree. And you said the word contempt, and I'll say one more plug for Godard, who also is problematic. People have problems with him as well. But Le Mépris, or Contempt, is also one of the greatest films, I think, of all time.
Okay. Gotcha. Now, if there's any part of that you disagree with, I'd love to hear it. Is there a point for you?
I think there's probably a line here or there.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to look, I will, as the saying goes, I will defend to the death your right to say it, even though I disagree with it. I believe in that. But I'm also of the opinion that people talk about, well, you're deplatforming this or that person, or you should or you should not. It's like, you're going against free speech. Free speech has nothing to do with it. Free speech is when the government stops you from saying something. Right. If a person has a private platform and they don't want you on it, they can take you off it.
Yes. And that's exactly. So I think with all the Kanye stuff and whatever going on and Twitter, and I do think there's a line, and I don't agree with the Elon Musk take of like, just let it all spew out, because it's been proven that stuff also leads to violence, So I think there's a line, but I also think it's murky, and I think there's a lot of nuance, and I just don't think is something that I even have the answer to. It's for me always a moment to moment decision that I make with what I try to consume or what I do consume. And
well, plus technology is always changing, and we're discovering there's a tech expert, I think his name is Tristan Harris, who did a documentary, you'd probably like it, The Social Dilemma, where he talks about what social media does to us. And he said, I think when it comes to Facebook and Twitter, the government probably needs to get involved and start regulating it more, like they do with tobacco companies, because we can empirically show that there's some harm that's beginning to happen with people. And that
was before TikTok.
Yeah.
And that's really bad.
I got on TikTok for about 2 weeks, and I said, I got to get off. This is Chinese malware, for starters. There's some actual infiltration of our data that's happening.
Yes.
But also what it is demonstrably doing to kids is making them more anxious.
And it's rewiring our brains.
Yes.
Our dopamine, our pleasure centers, all of it. It's scary. It's really scary. Yeah.
Yeah. There are neuroscientists that are talking about this more and more, that if you are overloading your dopamine receptors, you're going to have some problems later. And so you've got to learn how to deny yourself pleasure on a moment to moment basis more often.
Yep.
Because otherwise you're going to have first of all, you're going to have a problem just existing without that constant fix. Mm-hmm. And that's not good, psychologically speaking.
No.
Yeah. So, which is one of the reasons why I like to talk for so long, also because I like to talk like you. But I like to give people a chance to watch something that is more than 9 seconds.
I think it's important. I know I have so many friends that are like, I can't watch anything. I can't even watch an episode of TV anymore. And I'm like, you guys, stop. Stop it. Where I'm like actively trying to like take weeks off Instagram and like just watch great films, like go through the Criterion channel and just like watch an old movie and like just try to be present, read books. Like I'm trying to actively get my brain away from that, but it's definitely not easy, and it's not where our culture's at. And maybe I'm fighting the wrong battle, but that's my battle that I'm trying to,
I recognize that the exact same pursuit that I'm trying to have. I'm trying to I've done this much. The first hour I'm awake and the last hour I'm awake, I try to not have any, no phone.
Yes. Same.
Right. So I try to do the same for myself. And then I use it as I need to throughout the day. And I think, wow, I'm so swimming upstream here. But more and more people, I think, are taking your point of view, that they recognize that, this is only making me more anxious. Yeah. It's only shortening my attention span. I don't have the capacity to enjoy the things that I enjoy enjoying. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm taking that off the table, perhaps that's not a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we Maybe we leave with that. Play less video games, folks.
No, play forever. I never want to stop doing Vantage.
Yeah, keep playing Apex.
Only Apex.
Only Apex. Look, if I was to recommend a video game, I would say, look, there are lots of things out there you can play. If you're going to play a first-person shooter, which is what Apex is, then why not play one that invests in the characters the way that this one does? Yes,
Yeah.
we're biased. Yes, we are biased.
But we're also right.
Yeah, it's possible to be opinionated and biased and correct.
Exactly.
Well, if there was anything you would like to leave us with, a parting comment for the fans of the game, the people that do enjoy playing your character, and not just because she's fun to play, but because of her story, and people who want to discover your other art, is there a way that they can find you?
Yes. I'll say thank you to everyone who loves to play Vantage and who enjoys her, because I love her deeply, and I think she's a part of me. Part of me is in her. I feel very close with her. And you can find me on Instagram after all that.
Social media is a toxic contagion.
You'll find me on social media.
At Natalie Canizares.
That's right. It's my name, at Natalie Canizares. And I have a Twitter. I think it's like Natty Ice or something. I don't open it ever, as you found.
As I know.
I literally just don't open the app. I'm sorry. It's not because I'm mean. It's just because I'm trying to keep my phone consumption down. You can find me. My website is nataliecanizares.com, which just doesn't really have much, but and hopefully you'll see me on TV, many commercials, and coming to shows and all that. So
okay, cool. Yeah. We will keep an eye out. That's well, I'll keep an eye out too. And anytime if you get a wild hair and there's something you really want to discuss, then yeah, let me know. I'll put it up. Yeah, exactly. We'll flesh it out right here. So in the meantime, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you for, finally at long last answering. I have to actually thank Justine.
I just don't open my requests. So that's what I was just, and then Justine, who I follow, Huxley, I think she DM'd me because I follow her. I saw it because in my requests, I have some really nasty messages. So I try to avoid that. It's self-preservation, a lot of it as well. As a woman, you get some really gross DMs. So I just learned a long time ago.
Can't you turn those off so only people that you approve of can DM you?
That's right. And that's why my request folder. So people were, now that I checked, people were contacting me for you in my request folder, but I didn't see it because it was in my request folder. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Gotcha. I gotcha. Yeah. And if you're watching, folks, don't do that. All right. Don't say mean things. Okay.
Yeah.
Not every thought. Yeah, don't be mean, don't be gross. And you're being mean and gross, okay? Yes. And not every thought you have deserves to be heard or read.
Yeah, maybe just think it through and then just let it pass through you.
Right. You are not your thoughts, you are your actions, okay? Hey. You have a thought doesn't mean you have to act on it. Exactly. So
parenting lesson, yeah.
Yeah, please do that. I've become avuncular in my old age. But thank you again.